gorgeous spa resort here. The natural healing spring waters.
It's actually supposed to jump in this lake. I haven't done it.
You haven't jumped in yet?
Well, I've been sick the whole time. And
yeah, maybe you shouldn't jump in then.
Yeah, have you seen it? It looks a little bit green and murky.
I'm not jumping in the lake. there's no chance I'm jumping in that lake. I shouldn't say no chance, but I would need a significant push. I never had the privilege of playing with Stu Unger. I'm not that old, and actually I wouldn't have to be that old to play with him, as he won the championship in '97. But I never played with Stu Unger, and from what I gathered, you know, I think Stu's game was way ahead of his time, and I think a lot of players today incorporate a lot of what Stu did in their game, and my guess is that Spindler does as well. I think the best players in today, you know, they pick their spots, and you know, they're ridiculously aggressive when they can be,
right? And
then they pull back, and they're constantly changing gears.
I mean, that's the thing. If everyone played the same, it would just come down to luck and cards that you've been given. It's great to see players, old and new, evolving and adapting their games.
You know, also, let's not be results-oriented. Mateos raises, by the way. Dominic calls. Flop is Jack, Jack, 3, Rainbow. Let's not be results-oriented. If Fabrice doesn't turn the flush,
right.
You know, if he doesn't turn the flush, that bluff with the ace-jack might work. If Dominic doesn't have absolute top of his range, having aces, you know, maybe that 4-bet works, and maybe Spindler's on 1.9 million chips, and we're talking about what a great aggressive player he is.
Yeah, of course, and that's what I was saying before. His timing's just not been great today.
Right.
He's running into aces, you know, he's running into the second nut flush.
I mean, if Fabrice has pocket queens there, or even pocket aces, and Spindler gets him to fold the overpair,
right. We'd be like, what a genius.
Wow, what a great play.
Yeah.
You know?
And look how aggressively he's playing. He's taking charge of the table, you know, instead of saying, you know, he's entered into
rather than sitting back, he is
right.
he is the table captain, and he, you know, up to 2 million chips. Sometimes that's how poker goes, though. It's hard to make flushes, you know. It's clearly he didn't put his opponent on a flush. I don't think either one of us did either.
No, I didn't. Especially, yeah.
Dutch Wanderer wants to know how much the blue plaques are worth. The gray chips, 5,000. The red chips, 25,000. And the blue plaques are worth 100,000 each. Thanks for the tweets. Keep them coming in at WSOP, at Tuck On Sports. The unofficial final table, 9 players. Daniel Steinberg, Max's twin brother.
Oh, yes.
He was gone in 9th place. He made the World Series of Poker Europe main event final table in 2010. That's the one that James Board won. Dan Fleischman was also there. Ronald Lee. It was quite a final table.
Huget all in.
Got an all-in here from Jerome Huget.
Benny Fold, Fabrice, and Dominique.
All in for 19 big blinds. How big a hand do you need to call a 19 big blind shove?
I don't know. I don't think I'm calling any worse than Ace King.
3?
Ace King?
Yeah.
And how big a pair?
5. That was just right. No,
it depends on how I'm feeling. I don't want to give away my tricks and what I'm...
Well, against this particular player, I mean, against different players, I mean, people always say that when they come in commentary booth, they don't want to give away their secrets. You're going to call a 19 big blind shove completely different against different players. Against this particular player.
I think I'd need to have jacks in my hand, I think.
So jacks or ace king?
Yeah.
As I mentioned, so Dan Steinberg, who made the 2010 World Series of Poker Europe main event, made the unofficial final table this year, came in 9th place. Shannon Shore, very successful young pro, came in 8th place, took home 77,000 euros. Andrei Konopelko earned himself 101,000 euros for his 7th place efforts. And that leaves us here, 6-handed in level 22. There are 20 minutes remaining in this level. Blinds are 10,000, 20,000 with a 3,000 ante. They'll jump up to 12.24 in 20 minutes. Spindler folds.
Benny and Fabrice fold.
C4 makes it 40,000. 5 folds.
40, 40,000.
Dominic raises to 40,000. It's a min raise. Raghavan,
Adrian folds.
27 years old. This is his second career World Series of Poker final table. First one coming in the 1500 pot limit hold'em event back in 2009, where he finished 9th.
6 raises.
His career earnings stand at over 2.3 million.
Ravi raise.
And Ravi is 3-bet.
120.
He's been fairly active early on as well.
Playing the ball. 900.
Dominic wants to know exactly what he's playing. And we can tell you that he started the hand with 970,000 chips. Total prize pool, 3.6 million euros. First place, 1 million euros. Raghavan, 3-betting to 110,000. Once again from the small blind. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is the third time that Raghavan has 3-bet from the small blind. It's definitely the second time, and we're only 19 hands in.
Raise.
There's the 4-bet from Dominic.
Dominic re-raised 210.
And while these players are extremely deep, if we had a different set of players at this final table, we could play for 20 hours.
All in.
And there's an all-in from Raghavan.
Fabian and Solin and Dominic.
6 all in.
And a snap fold from Nietzsche. Nietzsche snap fold, so Raghavan was 3-betting for value and going with it. He 5-bet shoves with the ace-queen. And Dominic Nietzsche gives it up. So as I was saying, when the average stack is 93 big blinds,
Yeah.
if you were to put Daniel Negreanu and Eric Seidel, and some of the players that play a little bit slower, a little bit small ball, we could be here.
Go for days.
We could be here for hours upon hours. With these guys, we could be here for 12 hours, but it wouldn't shock me at all if this final table was over in 6 hours. You get a 3-bet, a 4-bet, and a call, and suddenly the pot is 600,000 chips already.
We definitely have some very active players at the table. So it'll be interesting to see how long it does take.
Yeah, there's a little bit over 11 million chips in play.
45.
And you get those pre-flop raises and 3-bets and 4-bets, and you get the pot up to 600,000-700,000.
I mean, if we lose a couple of players, you can imagine how deep the remaining players are going to be after that. So
I've seen crazier things. I remember doing the heads-up battle with Joseph Chung, where they were about 100 big blinds deep, maybe even more. And Chung got it all in with 4s.
wow.
So
Radical.
you've seen crazier things. Mateos raised with 45,000. Raghavan calls on the button. By the way, for the record, Joe was not ahead. This was, I believe, this was the Mix Max tournament a couple of years ago, and it was the semifinals against a Frenchman that the name is escaping me, but it was Kings against 4s, so no, he was not ahead.
We have 3 players.
Jerome Huget calling with, he only has about 19 big blinds, 20 actually now. He's going to make the call. So this one 3 ways.
King of hearts, 10 of club.
King 10 jack. Action on Huget. He's going to check.
7 checks.
Mateos checks as well.
Jerome and Adrian check.
Who can best represent this flop?
6 checks.
The pre-flop raiser, the pre-flop caller,
Turn
or
is
the guy in the big blind who just completed?
You know, on a King 10 Jack hand, I think anyone that was
Jerome
probably in
check.
position should be representing at least something there.
Adrian check.
Check, check.
I mean, Raghavan's going to have a lot of
Right.
queen tens in his hand. I mean, something along those lines. Now, he could easily have also fives. But
I know.
it just feels like a spot to take a stab.
I'd be more likely to put Shigshээ on a smaller pair.
Ravi bet 75.
I mean, Shigshээ could have 7-6 suited also. I mean, he was in there for half a bet already.
Right.
It was only another, it was only another 25,000 for him to call.
Well, he's not instant folding.
It's actually
so
35,000 more to
maybe
call,
he's in
sorry.
there with a weak ace. A weak suited ace, maybe.
Shigshээ actually called from the small blind. We mentioned earlier something you don't see a lot of experienced pros doing. So Shigshээ actually called for 35,000. It would suggest he has a stronger hand than just out of the big blind. So, those Broadway cards are definitely in his range, but at the same time, small pairs are. The fact that he's thinking about it would suggest that he doesn't have a small pair. Then again, who knows? Whether Raghavan has the hand or not, I love this bet. I mean, I think he's checking back a lot of like queen 10.
I was going to say, is this
queens.
a Hollywood in here? I think it's the queen.
Makes it
there.
150.
And there's the raise. Just a quick fold.
When we raise 150 and Ravi fold.
Ravi had deuces and Shigshээ queen jack.
Support,
And it easily could have been switched.
Yeah.
I like the bet by Raghavan, though. I really do.
I mean, I don't know. I think the performance before the raise there was a little bit.
Would you just call? I mean, because you're not getting.
Right.
I mean, you have to understand that your perceived images. Is there really any reason to raise that?
Right. But I suppose if he calls me, I think he's probably got the queen as well. I think he folds without it.
Shigshээ now up to 601,000 chips. He started today with 637. A little bit of a hiccup early when he lost with jacks to Benny Spindler. I think it was the only hand Benny Spindler actually won today. And so that was a bit of a hiccup. He was down to under 400,000. But Shigshээ, the 38-year-old, is back up to 600,000 here at the 7th Annual World Series of Poker Europe main event. Jackie Glazier, David Tuchman in the booth. And we are down to our final 6, 1 million euros up top.
Makes it 50,000.
There's a look at the young German pro, Dominic Nietzsche, raising the 50,000. Nietzsche has already won a World Series of Poker bracelet. He's won a WPT title. Looking for a bracelet on this side of the pond. Spindler's been very quiet for at least 4 hands. I don't think he's played a hand since like hand 17, and we're on hand 21, so. He probably thinks in his head that he's built up a tight image, right?
Wow.
He's built up some tight equity.
No, yeah, maybe one more hand.
Fabrice in the big blind, folding from the pot.
Nietzsche raising with the queen 10 suited and takes it down. So what's next for you? You're not going to play the WPT main event?
No, I've just been...
a little bit of rest, a little R&R now?
Yeah, I've been pretty sick, pretty much starting from EPT in London right through to playing the main event here. And I think the thought of sitting down and playing my opening hand of another lengthy tournament, just the light at the end of the tunnel seems so far away, and I don't know if I'll make it. So, it's a reasonably big size buy-in, and it's not something I want to risk.
Jackie Glazier won her first bracelet just about a week ago. These players looking for a World Series of Poker bracelet. Are you going to watch the November 9? Or is it going to be too painful?
No, definitely. To be honest, I don't watch a lot of poker. It's sort of when I'm not playing, that's my downtime. So I'll definitely watch, especially to barrack for my favourites. But it's not painful at all.
Mateos raises to 45K. Mateos has very quietly maintained his chip stack, not taking many risks early on. At a very solid 3.6 million chips and about 189 big blinds. And there's a look at the 19-year-old in the orange salmon-colored shirt. right in the middle of your screen. Spindler in the sweater, counting out some chips, and looks like he's going to 3-bet.
C2 raises to 105.
Penny raised to 105. Fabulous folds.
I'm definitely jealous of the November 9.
Who isn't?
Yeah.
What poker player wouldn't be jealous
Right.
of those 9 players that all get to play for millions upon millions and the highest honor in all of
Yes.
poker, to be crowned world champion.
I mean, what an honor to even get there. I mean, it's
Oh.
such hard work.
I talked to David Peters yesterday before the final table of the high roller that he made, and he bubbled the November 9 back in 2010, and as proud as he is of that accomplishment, he realizes how hard it'll be to ever have a chance
Right.
again.
I think the thing is to have the opportunity to be in that position, to have a real chance of getting there. It doesn't happen that often.
Hand 22. Those look like 4-betting chips, and they are.
Raise to 230.
So a raise from Mateos,
3 raised to
5
2.
a 3-bet from Spindler,
35.
And Dominic
He
Nietzsche.
raised 235.
4 bets to 235,000. And that kind of puts Spindler to the brink. Spindler started this hand with 837,000. Spindler, he can't really call this, right? I mean, he's in a spot where he's got to shove or fold.
I mean, even he, I think. Do you think he's got a hand to start off?
Well, I don't know. I'm just wondering in terms of, I remember talking to Brian Rast about this, and he said the best players put their opponent on the brink. They put their opponent to the test for their tournament in a sense.
Right.
Nietzsche is only risking 235, but if Spindler wants to play the hand, he's going to have to risk his whole stack, which is 837. And Rast always points out, he goes, that's what the best players can do. They put the other player to the brink. And I feel like because of the stack sizes, Spindler's in a spot where he can't 5-bet fold. He can't
No.
5-bet bluff.
No.
And he kind of either has to
then
shove or fold, and
Yeah.
Spindler had Jack 4. And, well, Dominic actually had a hand.
Yes.
I thought maybe Dominic was making a move.
I
but-
was thinking that Spindler's been a bit quiet and was born just and doing what he was doing and 3-betting there light, but
in his head, he felt like, I built up some tight equity. I haven't played a hand in 5 hands.
yeah.
Waiting patiently is not in Benny Spindler's DNA. Spindler now at 729,000 chips. He has lost more than 1 million chips already in 22 hands.
And when you look at, he actually hasn't been dealt a lot of great premium hands. I mean, we are only 20 so hands in, but maybe he's just impatient.
You know, he hasn't picked up a lot of premium hands, although he picked up,
Fold.
I mean, we're only 22 hands in. He
Yeah.
picked up Ace-King once. He picked up Ace-Queen once.
So you
He's
got-
picked up Ace-Deuce and out-flop pocket jacks. You don't have to win that many. I mean,
Yeah.
far be it from me to question Spindler. I think he's a great player. I have
Yeah.
a ton of respect for his game. His results speak for themselves.
Definitely.
You know, this is a great player. I mean, right now, Spindler is voluntarily entering 55% of the hands. And it's gone down. It probably
It
was
has
closer to
gone down.
70% earlier on.
Yeah.
He's raised pre-flop 45% of the time.
C7 makes it 55,000.
Jerome raised
I
to
mean, Dominic has
55.
actually picked up aces and kings already, 22
Sure.
hands in. That's, you know,
And
obviously.
obviously we're 6-handed too, so, I mean, the play is generally a little bit more aggressive once we get more short-handed.
Yeah, no, for
Penny
sure.
fold.
Jerome Hughes,
Fabulous fold.
Jerome Hughes
Raising as
raising to 55,000. Raising a little bit more than the other players have done. Which probably not that much of a surprise. Looks like Mateos is going to call. Robbie, by the way, wearing the black
Yeah,
hat.
two
He is the
players.
lowest voluntarily entering pots. He's at 22%.
The flop is 8, 10 of club and 2 of hearts. Adrian check.
C5.
This is a flop that I think favors Mateos and not Huge. 10 high, 2 clubs.
C7. That's
But Mateos quickly lays it down.
Did
No.
Huge
Red
open?
55 and Adrian is done for.
Huge had ace queen. He had big
Zero
cards,
more
and
cards.
Mateos just had, had 9-3. But generally speaking, yeah, Huge was the pre-flop
Well, you were
raiser.
right, yeah, because he could have very easily had 8 deuce.
Oh, and I mean,
or 10.
Mateos,
10,
he's
8 or-
calling with
yeah.
9-3. He's in there with Jack
Right,
9.
yeah.
He's in there with 10-9. He's in there with 8-7. Huge's got a lot of big cards when he's raising. Does he have overpairs? Of course, but it's hard. It's hard to be dealt aces, kings, and queens. It's a lot easier to be dealt ace, king, ace, queen, or ace, jack, or king, queen.
Definitely.
Just a lot more combinations of those hands. There's a look at the 38-year-old amateur wearing the sunglasses and the white hat, Jerome Huge. Real estate agent, has a wife and a kid. Got in this tournament in a satellite, so he has parlayed about 10 euros into over 100,000 euros.
That's crazy.
As my producer mentions, and I've got to give him credit for this one, he has parlayed roughly 2 Diet Cokes into this. And by the way, it's actually less than 2 Diet Cokes because I was in Paris and I had a couple of Cokes with a buddy of mine.
Right.
And it was 13.50 euros.
Okay, well,
So they were over €6. They were 6.75 each.
but in the hotel minibar, they are €5. So
€5 each.
Yeah.
So two mini bar Cokes.
Yes.
Parlayed into over 100,000 euros. And that's what, to me, that's what the World Series of Poker is all
Raised
about.
to 51.
It's all about those stories. It's about, going back when Chris Moneymaker and all those, and every single year we see these bracelets won. We see hundreds of thousands of dollars
Scored by
won
Dominic.
by somebody who's got a few $100 and a dream.
Right.
And they might parlay a satellite
Very full. We have a
into
mix of between
another
Fabrice
event, and before you know it,
Dominic.
they're winning hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I think that's one thing that I absolutely love about poker is that a complete amateur can draw a table with some of the best players in the world and get that experience. No other sport can you do that.
No.
It's like the best.
At the World Series of Poker, you can come, and whether it's in Europe, Australia, or Las Vegas, you can come and you can sit next to the Daniel Negreanu's, the Phil Ivies, the Eric Seidels, the Chris Moneymakers of the world. And unless you've got a lot of money, it's going to be very difficult to ever book a round of golf with Tiger Woods.
And Dominic.
Fabrice Soulier bets 59,000. Dominic calls.
Turn.
Pot is now 268,000.
Turn is 8 of hearts.
I mean, obviously it's luck of the table draw as well, but there'd be plenty of players who would play that money if they said you guaranteed to sit down with one of these players.
Or unlucky, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I would consider it unlucky, but
I mean, I wonder sometimes if when my friends come out and they're weekend warriors and they come out to the World Series every year for one tournament, would they rather play, they want to sit down with Doyle Brunson, Phil Ivey, Phil Hellmuth, or would they rather have, a really soft table? And I think a lot of them would rather play with the Phil Hellmuths of the world.
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Have
I
a
think
chance
they
to
would.
knock out Phil. About a minute left in this level. Blinds will jump up to 12,000, 24,000.
125.
So if you were an amateur that loved the game,
Fabrice Soulier checked the turn. Dominic takes that lead, and he bets 125,000 into about 260. And Fabrice calls.
And it's called by Fabrice. It's the river.
they're going to stare at each other again.
The river is a just of club.
The Dominic stare down. When somebody stares at you like that, do you look away? Are you, is it, I don't want to say intimidating, but just a little bit just alarming?
See, I'm a guest. I can say, can you please stop looking at me?
Well, what if he's in the hand with you, I'm
it's making
saying?
me uncomfortable.
What if he's actually in the hand with you, though?
But I can twist it. That they're
You
looking
can still
at
twist it? Stop stalking me.
Yeah, can you stop staring at me? It's making me uncomfortable. No, I don't.
This is an interesting line from Fabrice. He leads out, after being the pre-flop raiser, he leads out, then he check calls the turn,
240.
and now he bets the river.
240 chez Fabrice.
Very, very interesting line that Fabrice Soulier has taken.
Call. Call.
This is the last hand of the level, and Dominic calls. Fabrice with 2 pair. Dominic didn't make much sense to Dominic Nietzsche, and he makes the call. And that is a huge pot. And Fabrice has not quite taken over the chip lead, but he's close.
Not lucky, I guess.
And that is the last hand of the level. And these players are going to go on break.
Exactly.
So thank you for watching the 7th Annual World Series of Poker Europe. 6 players still remain. We're going to leave you with some random coverage of the World Series of Poker Europe from Poker Listings. Thanks for watching.
For 1224, please shuffle up and deal.
There you heard the floor man. We are moving on to level 23. Blinds are 12,000, 24,000 with a 4,000 ante. 6 players still remain. We came back with 6. Levels are 90 minutes long. They go on a break after each level. Our chip leader continues to be Adrian Mateos, as the 19-year-old looks for his first ever World Series of Poker bracelet. Fabrice Soulier had a good first level, as he's now up to 3.38 million. Dominic Nietzsche down to 1.8 million. The real story, Benny Spindler came into today's action with 1.7 million. He's now at 723,000. Joining me in the booth is McLean Carr, who has won a WPT event, has made 2 World Series of Poker final tables, has won 4 high rollers all around the world, among other events. McLean, very well respected among the poker community. You're pretty familiar with Spindler.
Yeah, I mean, we've played. I've played a lot on the circuit and a lot in Europe, and he's played around the world as well. And you know, I've tussled with him in many high rollers.
I got a tweet, and I want you to answer it. Tweet is from Daniel Musan. Says Spindler must be playing a different game to me. I don't understand half of what he's doing, but he wins millions, so what do I know?
Well,
help out the audience who's watching, because right now, to somebody who doesn't understand or somebody who's new to the game, you're watching this guy raise 50% of the time pre-flop, play 60% of his hands, 3-bet, 4-bet, play uber aggressive, and lose 1 million of his 1.7 million chips. So explain his play to the masses that might not understand.
Well, I think what Benny does really well is he changes gears very well, and he knows at certain times in tournaments when if you can dial up the aggression and separate yourself from the field, then there's a huge added advantage of putting yourself to be more likely to get one of those top few spots. Because if you can get to the point where you can put most of the field that's left all in without significantly hurting your tournament life, then that's a huge advantage and allows you to chip up in a lot of little pots without having strong holdings, which he's very proficient at. So if he can sort of get to a point to where he can be deep enough to continue to put pressure on other players, he will then leverage that to his advantage.
Do you think Raghi Raghavan has raised to 53,000? Do you think the start of a 6-person final table is the time to ramp up that aggression?
I think that's a favorite time for a lot of people. When most final tables start unofficially, they might be 10-handed or officially 9-handed or even 8-handed on some tours, and you can still have such a high probability of running into really strong holdings. Once you get down to about the 6 max and less, it really opens up the range of hands where you can try to put pressure on players, and it's just much less likely that you're going to run into a premium holding or even a moderately strong holding that matchups strong enough on the board to where they're willing to risk going out.
Raghi Raghavan had raised. Jerome Huget, 3-bets. Now, earlier on, Huget did not 3-bet with jacks. I was wondering how big a hand he had, and it turns out he had aces. I mentioned this during the first level, and I think it's worth re-mentioning, is while to a lot of people you might be thinking Benny Spindler's playing crazy, he's playing uber aggressive, he's got to pull back a little bit. He has walked into the top of players' range. In a 6-handed game, you know, he's walked into Dominic Nietzsche's aces and his kings, and he also played a hand against Fabrice Soulier where he check-raised and then fired 2 bullets as a bluff, and Fabrice had a king-high flush.
And yet he still has a stack that can hurt most of the players at the table. He still has a good shot here. He He's done all those things without putting his tournament life at risk. And the reality is, most times these players are not going to have these strong holdings. And in the long run, he's probably going to be picking up a lot of chips in these scenarios. Sometimes he won't, but he still has not sacrificed his chance. He still has a chance to get back in this and then start doing it again.
Question always comes up, would you be thinking the same way if you didn't know the player, if it was a non-pro? But Benny Spindler's not a non-pro. I mean, this is a guy who, his record speaks for itself. This is his second World Series of Poker main event final table of the year, finished 6th in the World Series of Poker APAC main event. He won the EPT London main event. Third place finished in the PCA main event. He final table WPT Marrakesh, runner-up in the EPT Grand Final High Roller. Career earnings currently stand at $4 million. So clearly he's doing something right and raising again, this time to 65,000.
Yeah, he knows how to put on the pressure, and he manages his risk in a profitable way. And he takes very high risky spots, but he does it with still minimizing his downside.
I always feel like there's a fine line between brilliance and idiocy.
Yeah.
And I think most poker players think Spindler is brilliant. He's a great poker player. He's a great mind. If an amateur was doing the same things as Spindler was doing, would your first inclination be, well, this guy's crazy, what is he doing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, without the results, if some other guy came in here, you just think, man, this guy is just out of his mind. But then it's tough, and you have to have a
you
really
mentioned it, by the way.
experience.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you. Stojanovic.
Yes. But Stojanovic does not, in my opinion, manage his risk in the same way as Spindler. He's very aggressive, but in more of a gambling sense rather than putting himself in good positions to be deciding last or to be able to get away from hands. Whereas Stojanovic, I think, is more of your quintessential blaster, where he's just, if he has a piece or he has a draw, he's in there. He's either calling or raising and never folding.
I mean, and in your defense, I mean, Stojanovic, he put his tournament at risk more than once, and this was the heads-up battle against Dan O'Brien that he ended up winning the bracelet. He put his tournament at risk more than once. O'Brien didn't make the call in a couple of spots where if he had, he would have won the bracelet, and Stojanovic would have finished in second. Spindler, for all of this aggressive play, has never put his tournament at risk.
And that is one of the key differences, and that's like one of the true arts. If you can be really aggressive and find the times where you can be putting other people at risk, but at the same time, still leaving yourself that shot. Because as long as you have a stack that you can hurt someone else with, and that's where it's important to think when you're playing poker.
What's a stack that can hurt somebody else, though? Because right now, if he loses this hand, he'll be the short stack.
Well, right. And so he's no doubt aware of that, so he's going to have stronger hands in order to be able to continue on in pots now that his stack's a little bit shorter. So he should be changing gears a little bit here.
Right.
And so the key is to not get down to the point where someone can just flippantly call you off and say, well, you know, I'd like to bust this player. I probably have at least a 40 to 60% chance here, and send you packing. You want to make it to where people cannot easily call you off because it's too costly.
Runner out, runner spade. It went check on the turn. Action on Spindler. David Tuckman, McLean Carr in the booth here.
And this is a really interesting spot because Benny Spindler's plays might not have worked out earlier, it is really tough for him to stay in because so many hands get there. And
Benjamin shows pocket sixes. He flopped his
so he had a very strong hand.
What a terrible run out for Spindler.
And in honesty, Spindler might have still found a little bit of a call there, but with Fabrice and his chip stack and that river with the stack sizes, I think with a queen high, or with a pair of queens, it might not be strong enough to go to showdown. If he has a better kicker, maybe, but I think he should have probably tried to muscle Benny there.
Do you like the check on the turn by Spindler?
Yeah, I think that's fine, especially because Spindler can check raise all in there and not put his life at risk and probably get it in really good against the range of Fabrice.
7th Annual World Series of Poker Europe main event. This is the chip count by seat. And you can see that Mateos is in great shape. He's our chip leader. He also has position on the other two big stacks.
This is a great graphic. I love how, know, I'm a big graphs and charts guy, so you know.
That's what we do here. That's what we do here. This is all for you, McLean.
Oh, this is wonderful.
Now, Mateos, the fact that he is 2 to Fabrice's left and right on Dominic's left, that's got to be a huge advantage, right?
The fact that Mateos is 2 to Fabrice's left?
Yeah, and right to Dominic's left as well.
Well, right, yeah, and it's amazing how important seat draw can be sometimes with these relative stacks. So it should mean that Mateos will have a few more opportunities to muscle the short stacks and to play in position against the big stacks when they're trying to muscle. So he can flat a lot and playing position and kind of put these guys in a lot of tricky scenarios where they're not going to want to risk their large stacks against him. So he was fortunate to have this draw at this point.
King of clubs.
Mateos, by the way, came into today's action with just under 3.8 million. He's now at 3.5 million. So he's lost a couple 100,000, but still maintains the chip lead. This was another raise for Spindler. Dominic calling from the big blind. Dominic checks a king high flop. Possible club flush draw out there.
And that's probably a good strategy for Mateos to start out pretty, you know, close to the vest, let some of these short stacks kind of go wild a little bit. He doesn't need to risk a lot against a lot of these great players early on. He's got a lot of chips. Let the poker come to him a little bit at first. So I think that's probably wise of him to not start out at a 190 miles an hour like you were saying Benny came out.
We've seen it. I mean, we've seen a lot of players. I've covered so many final tables where you see the chip leader sometimes play it, and they're driving 200 miles an hour, and then other times where you see players, you know, playing it like Adrian Mateos is, just kind of, okay, let me see what happens. Let's see how this one plays out. You know, you pretty much at least guarantee yourself a top 3 finish that way, and you know, without.
Yeah, it becomes much more likely, and you keep the chips so that when there are some battles with these smaller stacks, when someone is shorter, it's easier for you to be the one to maybe knock them out and chip up, because you can just wait for a premium holding. You've earned these chips, so you can wait for really good scenarios rather than trying to manufacture them.
We are super deep. We have over 11 million chips in play. Blinds are 12,000, 24,000. So you're talking about, you know, average stack somewhere in the 80 big blind range.
Yeah, this is great. What a great structure this tournament has.
What would be your strategy if you came into this final table with kind of an average stack? What would be your strategy?
Well, it depends on my seat, and it always depends on how the other players are playing. You know, a lot of people, I think, they wake up in the morning and they say, today I'm going to play a poker tournament. I'm going to play tight today, or I'm going to try to do this today. And I would caution any player from forming a plan before you sit down at your table and you assess all the variables in play. You know, it depends on how the other table is playing, or how the whole table is playing. Who's sitting where? Which person just got stung recently and lost a lot of chips? Who is rushing? Because when people are rushing, they're playing confident, and there are other elements to why that happens too. Maybe just the chemistry of the table works out for them. So for me, if I have a middle stack, it does depend. Do I have Benny Spindler on my left? If he's on my left, I'm going to probably have to play lockdown a little bit more, because I know he's going to be putting a lot of pressure on me. And so I'm probably not going to be putting chips in a lot of times unless I'm willing to go a little bit deeper with those chips. So my marginal holdings, I'm going to be less apt to speculate.
Spindler raised last hand and took it. Spindler back up to 910,000. Our short stack continues to be Jerome Huget, the Frenchman, 38 years old.
Which is a great name. I love Huget.
Huget.
Yeah.
It's actually Huget. Spindler raises again. We've come back from the break. I think we've seen, I want to say 5 hands since the break, and I think Spindler's raised 4 of them, or maybe all of them.
He's been involved in most of the hands.
Makes it 106,000.
Now Fabrice he's the one player at this table that's 3-bet him fairly light. He 3-bet him earlier on with 5-6.
Right. And Fabrice should be doing that some. He has the chip stack, he has the position, and Fabrice has the sort of, you know, chutzpah almost, you could say, to go with it. He is a field player, he's been around a long time, and he's very good at trusting his gut and his instincts. And he knows that Spindler can't have premium holdings this often. And so he's going to be in there and forcing Spindler to maybe try to hang himself and then hopefully be there when to pick up the chips.
You are listening to the voice of McLean Carr. I'm David Tuckman, and that is Raghavan, who is only raised 10% of the time.
Yeah, Ravi
but when he raises, it seems it's always a 3-bet.
Well, and that's what a lot of people say.
Or 4-bet.
There's a mantra sort of that some of the players will say where you should either raise tight, 3-bet light, or raise light, 3-bet tight. Because if you try to do, if you're raising really
Say it
tight,
again?
raise tight, 3-bet light. Because then you have a really tight image, but then you can 3-bet light, and people be like, wow, this guy hasn't opened any hands, and now he's 3-betting.
That seems like it's Ravi's.
And they're more apt to give you respect, and you collect the chips. Whereas you could say, raise light, 3-bet tight, so you're just putting out little speculative bets. And then when you finally 3-bet, people are like, oh, this guy's been playing every hand. He must not have something here.
I want that should be a bumper sticker. That'd be a great. I want that in the back of my car.
The first person I heard say that was David Fox, who's been grinding a long time. I don't know if you know him. He's been around the circuit, mainly a East Coast based in the U.S. player. But I respect David a lot, and he was the first one I heard said that, and it kind of stuck in my mind.
Fabrice, like I said, he has 3-bet light. Ravi, he has been, he's only raised 10% of the time. Here's the 5-bet.
402,000.
So the raise, a 3-bet, a 4-bet. Back over to Fabrice, who has now 5-bet. We saw Ravi 3-bet with King 10 offsuit earlier on.
Yeah, Ravi will 3-bet light. For doing 4-betting or 5-betting, he'll probably play it a little closer to the vest. If you were to see his stats online right now, you'd see that he's a more conservative player. He plays under the name of GovShark2 on most sites, and he's been on the scene playing online for a long time.
He gives it up. Let's see what they got.
Yeah, rightfully so.
You like the 4-bet with ace-10 from the small blinds?
I do, because in this scenario, it's probably the best hand. And it's hard to play from the small blind just flatting and seeing a flop and playing out of position with a hand that's not made like ace-10. It is suited, so maybe if there were 2 other players in the hand, then it kind of flips, and you might have more speculative odds to hit a flop. But
that is Fabrice's friend wearing the scarf. Apparently, I don't think it's that cold.
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't know either. Maybe it's just a fashion statement or solidarity with
it's
the
a French thing.
scarf.
There you go. Yeah. By the way, that was actually a 4-bet from the big blind.
Okay.
Not from the small blind.
Right, but it's still out of position.
Right.
As does Fabrice.
Nonetheless.
Right.
So far no one at kings against my aces.
Fabrice clearly was going with the hand. He certainly wasn't 5-bet folding.
And you have to choose some hands sometimes to 4-bet or 3-bet light.
Makes it 50,000 to play.
So that the times when you do have it, people can justify paying you off. If the only time you ever 3-bet or 4-bet is with kings and aces, then it's going to be very apparent to your opponents, oh, this is what they have. And if we're deep enough, I can call, and if I have a hand that beats those hands, I'll get a lot of value. Or if you're not deep enough, just fold and say, well, clearly you have the best holdings. It's an easy fold for me.
And if you go to the other side of the spectrum, you look at Daniel Negreanu, who we saw yesterday actually flatting with aces. He so rarely 3-bets that, and because he likes to flat so often with such a wide range of hands,
right,
he protects that by flatting also with his huge hands.
Right, and it makes it very difficult to play against Daniel, and that's one of his strengths, and that's the flip side of the pre-flop raising game. And there are other pros who do this as well. Matt Waxman is also very well known for just flatting a lot and getting to the streets, taking it to the streets, and that's where Daniel's very comfortable, and he makes a lot of good decisions on the subsequent streets. And as he collects more information and feels more out of how it's going. And those later streets are where the pots get even bigger. And so if you can make really good decisions on the turns and rivers where the pots are very large, then you're securing yourself a lot of value in these tournaments. And that's where Daniel has found his sort of specialization and where he feels he has an edge over the opposition. And clearly, as you can see yesterday, he won the high roller playing that way, and he's won many other tournaments playing that way, and you have to applaud.
6 bracelets. Jerome Huget raising from the small blind. Spindler calls. Flop is 9-6-5. 2 hearts. Huget first to act. This is kind of the one wild card in this game. He definitely plays a little bit more unconventional.
But he very conventionally is wearing a scarf, as we see the French players at the table, 100% of them with scarves, and a high percentage of the spectators as well. It's almost like it's
Are you not a scarf guy?
No, I actually own a few scarves, and I've played in scarves. I enjoy scarves. It's kind of like one of those things where I can make fun of them because I wear scarves too.
Right.
Fabrice can hear us.
Xigshээ bets 45,000, and my guess is that Xigshээ is probably going to bet any flop, short of unless he flops the nuts. Right. He's probably betting.
And this is one of Benny's ideal situations. He's with one of the presumably weaker players at the table. It's a very wet board, and he's going to want to hang around, try to sense a little bit of weakness, and probably take it away from this guy.
I think Spindler loves it. I think Spindler hates the turn, though.
That can be a good turn, because if this guy
for Spindler,
well, sure. Spindler's in position. Xigshээ is playing out of the small blind. The ace comes. It's a scare card to just about any pair, presumably, that Xigshээ would have been betting to begin with.
If Xigshээ actually had anything, right?
If he actually had anything.
Jerome makes it 75,000.
And it's one of those spots where there can be even more scare cards on the river, where Benny could just flat here again. And depending on his read on the river, or another scare card, another overcard,
Benjamin calls.
He could maybe get a pair of 9s, even a pair of 10s.
Spindler calls.
Pair of 8s, 6, 7, all these sorts of hands maybe fold.
Spindler called. The blue plaque, 100,000. The red chips are 25K. The gray chips are 5K. Action on Xigshээ.
That's a tough bluff card for Benny Spindler. Xigshээ not slowing down. He's trying to make the pot Xigshээ.
That's 100,000.
I avoided any of those puns.
I'm going for the easy ones. I'm not as seasoned as you are, David. So, I've got to just take the low-hanging fruit that's in front of me. I don't have the experience you have.
I figured at some point we'd have to do it.
I have no shame in being the first one. The cornier the puns, almost the more I enjoy. The older I get, the more I find I'm enjoying puns. And I remember when I was younger and I'd make fun of teachers or my parents and say those jokes are so lame. And it's just the ironic twist of fate. You're always doomed to become, that which you scoffed at, I think.
Oh, of course. So. Xigshээ bets 100,000. The pot is now a modest 464,000. Spindler is to act, and earlier on, these guys have a little bit of history. Xigshээ had jacks, Spindler had ace deuce, had turn 2 pair, and Xigshээ put out a small little blocker bet. He bet like 35,000 into 260,000, and this time Spindler's going to move all in.
So he does sense the weakness here.
This bet's bigger, though. This bet is bigger. He bets 1/3 of the pot.
Spindler could have a good hand here, and this is when it's tough to play him, because he could have been hanging around there with a 5-7 or a 5-8 and maybe hit the 5 on the river. Or he could have squadouche and just be moving because he feels this player is not going to want to risk.
Do you think Spindler has it or not?
I think
against this particular player.
I think it's, I would say about 80% that Spindler doesn't have it. But there's always the chance that he could have, he could have any of these holdings that you see.
So the players at the table are all hoping.
This is the advantage for Spindler. Also, that helps him bluff because he's playing so many hands. When there are scary cards like this, he could have it. It is totally possible he could have it.
What do you do if you're Xigshээ and you've got, he calls.
No, I think he was just trying to get a read there. It was the classic sort of...
Man, that's really close to a call.
Yeah, it is close.
That could easily be a call.
And I really don't appreciate it when players do this, and they often try to do the pump fake. And I think it's almost laughable when you do it against a pro like Benny.
That's forward motion. I mean, that could have easily been construed a call.
Yeah.
And he does call.
Makes a call.
You win.
Yeah. And he says you win. And Xigshээ's got ace-7.
Yeah. So he did hit the ace on the turn.
Benjamin
Benny did go for it.
of clubs. He is actually playing the board.
Jerome
has an ace of spades, 7 of hearts, aces and 5s.
Benny was just hanging around trying to take it away because that it was his ideal situation. And
yeah, I just felt when Xigshээ raised pre-flop, a lot of times. I mean, he can have a big king or something, but I just feel like he's got a lot of those garbage aces in his hand, and the ace comes off.
And this, yeah,
it's hard to bluff.
So you were right.
It's hard to bluff the amateur.
And once someone hits the ace, that's also and especially on the turn, it's hard to bluff them off that because they're thinking this guy thinks I don't have the ace, and I have a pair of aces.
Plus, I mean, the board is wet enough.
Thank you.
I don't know. Like I said, I hate being results oriented.
Right.
And I'd love people to tweet in and let us know if you could try to remove the actual result from it. I wonder if that's a good bluff or not against this particular player. Well, I think against other players, you can represent the 5 a little bit more. I wonder against an amateur.
And when he 3 barrels into you, the amateur, when he 3 barrels into you on a final table of the World Series of Poker main, then typically they're pretty strong.
Yeah, and you said that Benny Spindler doesn't normally risk all his chips. Well, he's gotten to the point where he is not feared by anybody. Well, he has and 7 big blinds.
And he was getting shorter. I do know that he wants to get involved with the weaker players at the table, but with a 3 high, that's a pretty low holding.
The funny thing is, I had no problem at all with calling pre-flop. I had no problem at all floating the flop because I think you can take it away on a ton of turns.
Well, right, unless it comes with an 8 or an ace, he's probably going to find a way to win the hand.
The only thing I mentioned was earlier on, Jerome Huget bet 35,000 into like 270 when he was clearly scared of the ace. This time he bet 100,000.
I know.
Right. So he was almost, because he was scared, he might have been making such a big bet so that he doesn't have, so he has to call off. Well, I mean, so he's basically making his decision now and playing stress-free poker.
Well, he made a more normal bet. He bet 100,000 into like 300. He bet, so it was a more, it was
a modest sort of value bet.
Exactly. It wasn't the 35,000 into 270, which was clearly a blocker bet.
Right. And I think the 5 is just a tough, it's a bad river card for Benny to bluff. And I said earlier, it pairs the board. He could have the 5. I mean, like I said, he had the 3 deuce. He could have easily had the 5, but it just makes it a lot harder.
And he's going to get called. Definitely going to get called.
Most likely.
Well, Mateos is only 103,000. The pot's 251.
Excuse me, Adrian calls.
And Adrian does make the call.
Pocket queens, queen of diamonds, queen of clubs.
Spindler picks up queens.
And people sometimes say that this only happens online after you make a huge misplay, and then the very next hand you get your premium holding, and it's kind of a slap in the face. Like, why didn't I just wait for this hand? And he's a little sick, too, because he has such a wild image that his queens could have probably got some really good action. But it happens live, too.
Flop is 6 of clubs, 6 of hearts,
Great
7 of hearts.
Yep, running hearts for Mateos. Or a king.
Benny is so well respected in pro circles, though, that another pro, I don't know if you know Salman Behbahani, but he's a really well-liked pro around the circuit, really funny guy. He actually named his dog.
Hold on a second here. A 6
and a 6.
Or a king.
Right.
A 6 or a king.
It is one of the sickest ways to go if the 6 comes.
Here's the river.
And the river card comes.
It's a king. Not Benny Spindler's day. Just
and
not
let's hear it for Benjamin. Well played, Benjamin. Our 6th place finisher in the main event WSOP Europe.
You drive like you're on the Autobahn at the poker table and just pedal to the metal. Sometimes you get all the chips right away and you have a really great chance of winning it, but you also run the risk of being the first one out.
With all due respect to Jerome Huget, I have to imagine that Mateos, Fabrice Soulier, Dominique Nietzsche, and Raghavan are all very happy that Huget made that call.
Oh, for sure.
And he is now the one with 1.4 million, and Spindler's out the door. Spindler does earn 126,000 euros, a far cry from what he was hoping for. But when I first started playing poker, I stupidly thought, and this was one of the worst things I could ever think was, and it's kind of an old adage of, oh, don't bluff a bad player. Don't bluff an inexperienced player.
Don't bluff a fish, right.
Right. But truth be told, you actually can bluff bad players.
Right.
It's just, you got to pick the right spots.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to recognize when they will overvalue some hands, and other players who you might be able to convince that they're beat in certain